I sat in Commander Williams' office, my hands gripping the sides of my chair so tight my knuckles had turned white. Across from me sat a man in a 4-star general's uniform, and something about his face looked familiar, but I couldn't figure out where I'd seen him before. My heart was beating so fast I was sure everyone in the room could hear it. The general's dark eyes studied me with an expression I couldn't read. Was he angry? Curious? I had no idea, and that scared me more than anything. Commander Williams sat behind his desk looking more nervous than I'd ever seen him, which made my stomach twist into even tighter knots. In my 3 years at Norfolk Base, I'd never seen my commander look anything but completely confident and in control. "Sergeant Torres!" The general finally spoke, his voice deep and serious. "Do you remember helping a family 2 weeks ago?" My mind went blank for a second. 2 weeks ago? I helped people all the time. It was just who I was. But then it hit me like a lightning bolt. The storm, the family stuck in the mud, the man who asked for my name. "Yes, sir," I managed to say, though my voice came out smaller than I wanted it to. There was a family stranded during that bad storm. Their car was stuck. The general leaned forward slightly, and I noticed his hands were folded calmly in his lap. Everything about him seemed controlled and powerful, which made me feel even smaller in my chair. "Tell me about that night, Sergeant. Every detail you can remember." I swallowed hard, trying to organize my thoughts. Why was a 4-star general asking me about helping some random family? Had I done something wrong? Maybe I wasn't supposed to stop during my supply run. Maybe I'd broken some rule I didn't know about. I was driving back to base after a long day on supply duty. I began, my voice getting steadier as I talked. It was around 9 at night, and the storm was getting really bad. Rain was coming down so hard I could barely see the road. The general nodded, encouraging me to continue. Commander Williams was taking notes, which made me even more nervous. Why was this important enough to write down? I saw taillights ahead of me, kind of off to the side of the road. When I got closer, I could see it was a car stuck in the mud. There was a man, a woman, and 2 kids inside. They looked scared. "What did you do next?" the general asked. I pulled over and got out to help. The man explained they were visiting family when the storm hit, and their car slid off the road during a bad wind gust. They'd been stuck there for about an hour. I remembered how cold and wet I'd gotten that night, working in the pouring rain to hook up my tow rope to their car. My uniform had been soaked through by the time I finished, but seeing the relief on that family's faces had made it all worth it. "The father seemed really grateful," I continued. "He kept trying to give me money, but I told him I didn't want anything. I was just glad they were safe." "And what did he ask you before you left?" The general's question was quiet, but something in his tone made me pay extra attention. "He asked for my name, said he wanted to remember the person who helped them." I paused, studying the general's face again. That familiar feeling was getting stronger. "Sir, may I ask why you're asking about this?" The general exchanged a look with Commander Williams that I couldn't interpret. Then he turned back to me, and for the first time since I'd walked into this office, I saw something that might have been a small smile at the corner of his mouth. "Sergeant Torres," he said slowly, "that was my family you helped that night." The words hit me like a truck. My mouth fell open, and I felt all the blood drain from my face. The quiet man in civilian clothes who'd asked for my name was sitting right in front of me, wearing a uniform covered in stars and ribbons. I'd helped a 4-star general and his family, and I'd had no idea. "But there's something else we need to discuss," the general continued, and his serious tone made my heart start racing again. 2 weeks earlier, I was bone-tired as I drove my old pickup truck down the empty highway toward Norfolk Base. It had been one of those endless days that seemed to stretch on forever. I'd been on supply duty since 5 in the morning, driving all over Virginia to pick up equipment and materials for the base. My back ached from loading and unloading heavy boxes, and all I wanted was to get back to my barracks, take a hot shower, and fall into bed. The storm had been building all afternoon, but I thought I could beat it home. Dark clouds had been gathering on the horizon when I started my last pickup, but the weather report said the worst of it wouldn't hit until after midnight. I should have known better than to trust a weather report in Virginia. By 8:30, the first drops of rain started hitting my windshield. By 9, it was coming down in sheets so thick I had to slow down to 30 miles per hour just to see the road. The wind was howling something fierce, rocking my truck back and forth like it was trying to push me off the highway. I turned my radio up louder, trying to stay alert. The last thing I needed was to fall asleep at the wheel after such a long day. The classic rock station was playing an old song my dad used to love, and I found myself humming along, trying to keep my spirits up despite the miserable weather. That's when I saw the red taillights ahead of me, glowing like two angry eyes in the darkness. At first, I thought it was just another car driving slowly because of the storm. But as I got closer, I realized the lights weren't moving. They were sitting still, and they were definitely off the main road. I slowed down even more and pulled over to the shoulder, my hazard lights blinking. Through the rain, I could make out a dark sedan that had slid off into the muddy grass beside the highway. The car was tilted at an odd angle, and I could see it was stuck pretty deep. My first thought was to just call it in and let someone else deal with it. I was exhausted, soaked from the rain that had gotten in when I'd loaded my last delivery, and I still had a 20-minute drive back to base. But then I saw movement inside the car and realized there were people in there. Real people who were probably scared and cold and didn't know what to do. I grabbed my rain jacket from behind my seat and stepped out into the storm. The wind immediately tried to knock me over, and the rain felt like tiny needles hitting my face. I jogged over to the stuck car, my boots squelching in the muddy ground. When I got to the driver's side window, I could see a man in his 40s with worried eyes. Next to him sat a woman who looked just as concerned. In the back seat were 2 kids, a girl who looked about 8 and a boy who might have been 12. They all looked up at me with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. The man rolled down his window a crack. "Thank goodness someone stopped," he said, raising his voice over the sound of the storm. "We've been stuck here for over an hour." "What happened?" I asked, having to shout to be heard over the wind. "We were driving back from visiting my wife's sister when this storm hit," he explained. "A big gust of wind caught us just as we were going around that curve back there, and the car just slid right off the road into this mud." I looked at their situation. The car was definitely stuck, with the back wheels buried deep in the soft ground, but it wasn't impossible to get out. I had a good tow rope in my truck, and my pickup had enough power to pull them free. "Don't worry," I told them, trying to sound confident despite the terrible weather. "I can get you out of here. Just give me a few minutes to get my equipment." The relief on their faces was immediate. The little girl in the back seat actually smiled and waved at me through the window. Back in Commander Williams' office, I stared at the general in complete shock. My mind was racing, trying to process what he'd just told me. The quiet, humble man who'd thanked me so sincerely that stormy night was actually one of the most powerful people in the entire military. "Sir, I had no idea," I stammered, feeling my cheeks burn with embarrassment. You seemed like a regular dad trying to get his family home safely." The general's expression softened slightly. "That's exactly what I was that night, Sergeant Torres. Just a father who was grateful that someone stopped to help when my family needed it most." Commander Williams was watching this exchange with his mouth slightly open, like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. I could practically see the wheels turning in his head as he realized that one of his soldiers had unknowingly helped a 4-star general without having any clue who he was. "My wife Patricia hasn't stopped talking about you since that night," the general continued. "She was so impressed that you refused any payment and seemed genuinely concerned about our safety. She said you worked in that terrible storm for over an hour, getting completely soaked, and all you cared about was making sure we could get home." I remembered that night clearly now. The general's wife had been so kind, offering me hot coffee from their thermos while I worked. Their daughter had drawn me a little picture on a napkin to say thank you, and their son had helped me guide the tow rope even though he was getting drenched in the rain. "Your family was very nice to me, sir," I said honestly. "They didn't act like I was doing anything special. They just seemed like good people who needed help." "And that's exactly why I wanted to meet you," the general said, leaning back in his chair. "Do you know how rare it is to find someone who helps others without expecting anything in return? Someone who sees a family in trouble and immediately thinks about their safety instead of their own convenience?" I shifted uncomfortably in my seat. I didn't feel like I'd done anything extraordinary. Helping people was just what you were supposed to do, wasn't it? My parents had raised me to believe that when you see someone who needs help, you help them. It was that simple. Sir, anyone would have done the same thing, I said quietly. The general shook his head. No, Sergeant Torres, they wouldn't have. 3 other cars passed us that night before you stopped. 3 other people saw a family stranded in a storm and decided it wasn't their problem. That made me feel sad. I couldn't imagine just driving past people who were stuck and scared, especially when there were children involved. What kind of person sees kids in trouble and just keeps going? After that night, I was curious about the young soldier who'd helped my family, the general continued, so I did a little research into your service record. My stomach dropped. Why would a general be looking into my records? Had I done something wrong? Was I in trouble for stopping during my supply run? Commander Williams cleared his throat. Sergeant Torres, you should know that your service record is exemplary. You've never had a single disciplinary action, and your performance reviews are consistently outstanding. I felt a little relief, but the general's serious expression told me there was more to this story. Your record is indeed impressive, the general agreed, but my investigation revealed something troubling that you need to know about. The relief I'd felt a moment ago vanished completely. My hands started sweating, and I gripped the arms of my chair again. Sir? I managed to ask, though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. The general exchanged another look with Commander Williams, and I could see something serious passing between them. Whatever they were about to tell me, it was big. Sergeant Torres, your supply unit has been under investigation for the past 6 months, the general said slowly. There have been reports of missing equipment and supplies. Several soldiers in your unit are suspected of theft. My heart stopped. Theft? Missing supplies? I thought about all my fellow soldiers, people I worked with every day, people I trusted. But there's something else, the general continued, his voice getting even more serious. The general's words hit me like a punch to the stomach. My supply unit under investigation, missing equipment? I thought about everyone I worked with. Rodriguez, Thompson, Wilson, and my Sergeant Peterson. These were people I saw every day, people I trusted with my life. Sir, I don't understand, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. What kind of missing equipment? Commander Williams pulled out a thick folder from his desk drawer and opened it. Over the past 6 months, we've had reports of missing radios, night vision equipment, medical supplies, and even some weapons accessories. The total value is over $50,000. $50,000? My head was spinning. That was more money than I made in 2 years. Who would steal that much equipment, and why was the general telling me this? The investigation has been ongoing, the general continued, and several soldiers in your unit have shown suspicious activity. Unexplained cash deposits, expensive purchases on military salaries, time unaccounted for during supply runs. I felt sick to my stomach. Sir, are you saying I'm a suspect? The general studied my face carefully before answering. Your name came up in the investigation, Sergeant Torres, but not in the way you might think. Commander Williams leaned forward. Elena, you're the only soldier in your supply unit with a completely clean record. While your colleagues were showing questionable behavior, your activities were completely transparent and accounted for. I didn't know whether to feel relieved or more worried. I don't understand what that means, sir. It means, the general said slowly, that investigators had 2 theories about you. Either you were the smartest criminal in the group, covering your tracks perfectly while everyone else made mistakes, or you were completely innocent and had no idea what was happening around you. My mouth went dry. The idea that anyone could think I was stealing from the military made me feel physically ill. I joined the army to serve my country, to make my parents proud, to do something meaningful with my life. The thought of betraying that trust was horrible. Sir, I would never steal anything, I said, my voice getting stronger. I've never taken so much as a pen that didn't belong to me. My parents raised me better than that. I believe you, the general said, and something in his tone made me look up at him. But the investigation needed proof, not just my gut feeling about your character. Commander Williams turned a page in the folder. The investigators noticed something interesting about your work patterns, Elena. Every time there was a discrepancy in the supply logs, you had worked extra hours to make sure deliveries were completed on time. When equipment went missing, you somehow managed to fulfill all your assigned missions anyway. I thought back over the past few months. There had been times when I'd had to work late because supplies weren't where they were supposed to be, or when I'd had to make extra trips because equipment counts were wrong. I just assumed it was normal military confusion, paperwork getting mixed up, people making honest mistakes. You were covering for someone, the general said quietly, working extra hours, making additional trips, ensuring that missions were completed even when supplies had been stolen. You were unknowingly helping to hide the real criminals' activities. The realization hit me like a freight train. All those late nights, all those extra trips, all those times I'd thought I was just being a good soldier and picking up the slack, I'd actually been covering for a thief. Who? I asked, though part of me was afraid to hear the answer. The general's expression grew even more serious. The investigation focused on your direct supervisor, Sergeant Peterson. He had access to all the supply schedules, knew when you'd be making deliveries, and could manipulate the paperwork to cover his tracks. Sergeant Peterson. The man who'd trained me when I first joined the supply unit. The man who'd always praised my work ethic and dedication. The man who'd often asked me to handle extra deliveries when he said he was dealing with paperwork emergencies. But we needed more than circumstantial evidence, the general continued. We needed to understand your character, to know for certain that you weren't involved. I looked up at him, suddenly understanding where this conversation was heading. That stormy night changed everything, the general said, his voice taking on a different tone. When I got home and told my wife about the young soldier who'd helped us, she described someone with genuine character, someone who worked in terrible conditions for over an hour, refused payment, and seemed truly concerned about our family's safety. I sat there trying to process everything. Sergeant Peterson, the man who'd been like a mentor to me, was a thief. All those times he'd asked me to cover extra deliveries, all those late nights I'd spent making sure everything was accounted for, I'd been helping him steal from the Army without even knowing it. The next morning, I called the investigators and told them about my encounter with Sergeant Torres. The general continued. I described your character, your integrity, your willingness to help strangers without expecting anything in return. It confirmed what they were already beginning to suspect. Commander Williams pulled out another section of the folder. Elena, we have evidence that Sergeant Peterson was systematically stealing equipment and selling it to private buyers. He was careful to spread the thefts across different time periods and different types of supplies to avoid detection. My hands were shaking now. How long had this been going on? At least 18 months, the general replied. Possibly longer. Peterson was smart about it. He never took too much at once, and he always made sure someone else could be blamed if questions were asked. I thought about all the times Peterson had sent me on last-minute supply runs, claiming there were urgent paperwork issues he needed to handle. All the times he'd asked me to double-check inventory counts because he said the numbers didn't look right. I thought he was being thorough and responsible. He used your dedication against you, Commander Williams said gently. Every time you worked late to make sure a mission was completed, every time you made an extra trip to ensure supplies reached their destination, you were unknowingly covering for his crimes. The worst part was remembering how proud Peterson had always seemed of my work. He'd written glowing performance reviews, recommended me for commendations, and always told other soldiers what a reliable worker I was. Had any of that been real, or was I just useful to him? We have recordings of Peterson selling stolen night vision equipment to a private buyer, the general said. We have bank records showing cash deposits that don't match his military salary. We have testimony from the buyer identifying Peterson as his contact. When did you arrest him? I asked quietly. 3 days ago, Commander Williams answered. He's currently in military custody awaiting court-martial. The evidence against him is overwhelming. I felt a strange mix of relief and betrayal. Relief that the investigation was over and that I wasn't a suspect. Betrayal because someone I'd trusted and respected had been using me to commit crimes against the military I'd sworn to serve. Sergeant Torres, the general said, leaning forward slightly, I want you to understand something important. Your integrity during that storm didn't just help my family, it helped solve this case. Your character in that moment confirmed what the investigators suspected about your innocence. I looked up at him, not sure what to say. It felt surreal that helping a stranded family had somehow led to exposing a criminal in my own unit. Peterson made one critical mistake, the general continued. He underestimated your character. He thought he could use your work ethic and dedication to cover his crimes indefinitely. He never considered that someone with your integrity would eventually be recognized for who they really are. Commander Williams closed the folder. Elena, you should know that your actions over the past 18 months, working extra hours, ensuring mission success despite the obstacles Peterson was creating, those actions saved this investigation. Without your dedication, we might never have noticed the patterns that led us to the truth. I sat there feeling overwhelmed by everything I'd learned. My mentor was a criminal. I'd been unknowingly helping him steal from the army, and somehow helping a family in a storm had led to this moment. Sir, I said finally, what happens now? The general smiled for the first time since I'd entered the office. Now, Sergeant Torres, we talk about your future. The general stood up and walked to the window overlooking the base. I could see soldiers going about their daily routines, completely unaware of the life-changing conversation happening in this office. My future? What did that mean? Sergeant Torres, the general said, still looking out the window, in my 30 years of military service, I've learned that true character is revealed not in the big moments that everyone sees, but in the small moments when no one important is watching. He turned back to face me, and I could see something different in his expression now. The serious, investigative look was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like respect. That night in the storm, you had no idea who I was. You saw a family in trouble, and you didn't hesitate to help. You worked for over an hour in terrible conditions, refused payment, and your only concern was our safety. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are. Commander Williams was watching this exchange with growing amazement. I could tell he was starting to understand that this conversation was heading somewhere he hadn't expected. Sir, I just did what anyone should do, I said, still not understanding where this was going. No, the general said firmly. You did what someone with exceptional character does, and that's exactly the kind of person I need in my command. My heart skipped a beat. His command? What was he talking about? The general returned to his seat and looked directly at me. Sergeant Torres, I'm offering you a position in my personal unit. It's an elite team that handles special operations and humanitarian missions around the world. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. A position with a 4-star general, that was the kind of opportunity that could change everything about my military career. The position comes with an immediate promotion to staff sergeant, he continued, along with a significant increase in pay and benefits. You'd be working directly with my team on missions that could have real impact on people's lives. I tried to speak, but no words came out. This was beyond anything I'd ever imagined possible. Just this morning, I'd been a regular supply sergeant worried about getting in trouble. Now I was being offered a chance to work with one of the highest-ranking officers in the military. Sir, I don't know what to say. I finally managed. This is incredible, but I'm not sure I'm qualified for something like that. Commander Williams spoke up. Elena, you're more qualified than you realize. Your service record shows consistent excellence, reliability, and integrity. Those are exactly the qualities needed for this kind of work. The general nodded. The missions we handle often involve helping people in crisis situations, natural disasters, humanitarian emergencies, situations where military personnel need to work with civilian populations. Your instinct to help people, combined with your proven reliability, makes you perfect for this role. I thought about what this could mean, working on missions that actually helped people instead of just moving supplies around, having the chance to make a real difference in the world. It was everything I'd hoped for when I first joined the Army. What kind of missions? I asked, my curiosity overcoming my nervousness. Disaster relief operations, medical supply deliveries to remote areas, security for humanitarian workers in dangerous regions, the general explained. Last month, my team helped evacuate civilians from a flood zone in the Philippines. Next month, we're planning a medical supply mission to a refugee camp in Africa. The more he talked, the more excited I became. This was real work that mattered, work that could help families like the one I'd helped in the storm. There's one more thing, the general said, and I could see a slight smile forming. My daughter Lucy has been asking about the nice soldier who helped us ever since that night. She wants to thank you properly for helping her family. The thought of seeing that sweet little girl again made me smile for the first time since entering this office. "Sir," I said, my voice getting stronger with conviction, "I would be honored to accept your offer." The general extended his hand across the desk. "Welcome to the team, Staff Sergeant Torres." As I shook his hand, I realized my life had just changed completely, all because I'd chosen to help a family on a stormy night. As I shook the general's hand, I felt a warmth spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the promotion or the pay increase. For the first time in my military career, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. "There's something I want you to understand, Staff Sergeant Torres," the general said, still holding my hand in a firm grip. "This opportunity isn't just about that night in the storm. It's about who you've proven yourself to be every single day since you put on that uniform." Commander Williams stood up and saluted me, which felt strange and wonderful at the same time. "Congratulations, Elena. You've earned this." The general released my hand and walked back to the window. "You know, when I first started investigating your background, I was looking for proof that you weren't involved in Peterson's crimes. But what I found was something much more valuable. I found a soldier who embodies everything the military should stand for." I thought about my parents back in Arizona, how proud they'd be when I called them tonight. My mom had always said that good things happen to good people, but I'd never really believed it until now. Sometimes it felt like doing the right thing just made life harder, not easier. "The work we do isn't always easy," the general continued. "You'll be in difficult situations, working with people who've lost everything, trying to bring hope to places where hope is hard to find. But I believe you're ready for that challenge." "Sir, can I ask you something?" I said, finding my courage. "Of course." "That night in the storm, when you asked for my name, did you already suspect who I was?" The general chuckled, and it was the first time I'd heard him laugh. "Honestly, no. I was just a grateful father who wanted to remember the person who'd helped his family. It wasn't until the next day, when I was thinking about your character and the investigation, that I put the pieces together." Commander Williams gathered up the files from his desk. "Elena, you'll need to report to General Hartwell's office tomorrow morning at 0800 for your official transfer and briefing." General Hartwell. Now I knew his name. The man whose family I'd helped was General James Hartwell, one of the most respected officers in the entire military. "There's one more thing," General Hartwell said, turning back to me with that slight smile I was beginning to recognize. "My wife Patricia insisted that you come to dinner this Sunday. She wants to cook for you properly this time, and Lucy has been working on a special thank you card for weeks." The thought of seeing that sweet family again, this time knowing who they really were, made me incredibly happy. "I would love that, sir." "And Elena," he said, using my first name for the first time, "when you come to dinner, you don't have to call me sir the whole time. James will do just fine." As I prepared to leave the office, I thought about the chain of events that had led me here. If I hadn't worked late that night, if I'd taken a different route home, if I'd decided the storm was too dangerous to stop, none of this would have happened. Peterson would still be stealing, I'd still be unknowingly covering for him, and I'd never have met the family that changed my life. "Staff Sergeant Torres," General Hartwell said as I reached the door, "I want you to remember something. What happened that night wasn't luck or coincidence. It was character. Your character. And character always finds a way to shine through, even in the darkest storms." I saluted both officers and walked out of that office as a completely different person than the one who'd walked in. As I made my way across the base, I thought about all the people I'd be able to help in my new position. Families caught in disasters, children who needed medical supplies, people who'd lost everything and needed someone to care. That stormy night, I thought I was just helping one family get home safely. I had no idea I was actually finding my way home, too, to the purpose I'd been searching for since the day I first put on my uniform. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest changes in our lives, and you never know who might be watching when you choose to do the right thing. The storm had passed, and my real journey was just beginning.